Hello there, welcome to Planet America, coming to you from the Situation Room. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello, and yes, we have a situation.
George Santos has been sentenced to 7 years in prison.
He told lie after lie.
Judge in Wisconsin was arrested this morning,
accusing her of helping an undocumented immigrant evade arrest by authorities in her courtroom.
Shame on her.
That's right, a judge arrested for helping an illegal immigrant and a disgraced congressman hoping for a presidential pardon to avoid jail.
Trump marks 100 days in office and the polls are slipping. We're going to be talking to the Atlantic's Ashley Parker and Republican Ford O'Connell.
It's 100 days since Donald Trump was sworn into his second term in office.
Our golden age has just begun.
Ever since Franklin Roosevelt launched a whirlwind start to his presidency in 1933, legislating his New Deal agenda and expanding presidential powers, what a president achieves in their first 100 days has been an important marker. And Trump's first 100 days has been busy.
Issuing sweeping pardons to nearly all of the rioters charged for their actions on January 6th.
Another controversial executive order signed is focused on ending birthright citizenship to children of undocumented immigrants.
We are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security.
You're gambling with World War III, and what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations.
President Trump's tariffs sparking a huge sell-off today, sending all three major markets plunging.
U.S. stocks are tumbling.
It looks like the U.S. has blinked.
The Trump administration is considering slashing tariffs on Chinese goods, in some cases by more than half.
So many memories, so much going on, but how's it going?
Just 39% of Americans approve of how Trump is handling his job as president. That's the lowest 100 days approval rating of any president in the past 80 years.
In fact, a series of polls this week have painted a pretty gloomy picture for President Trump, and his on-again, off-again tariff war may well be responsible. After beginning his second term with an approval rating around 52%, Trump's poll averages have been in steady decline, losing 2 points by the end of January, more than a point in both February and March, and since Trump's Liberation Day at the start of April, they're down to around 44%, a total slide of 8 percentage points in 100 days, making this Truth Social post last week a little bit baffling.
Trump's best poll numbers ever. Thank you.
Not quite. Look, I think it's worth diving into this polling though, John, because there is a lot going on there. The week started with this observation from Fox News.
If you look at our new Fox News poll at 100 days job approval compared to other presidents, there you see the president at 44%, and you see his first term at 45% at this mark, the 100-day mark.
It turned out that there was the good news for Trump, because right across the board there have been some dire results. Trump's even dipping into the 30s in a few polls now. Just to be clear, these 100-day polls have big samples. They are respectable polls generally. But what does this mean in context? Because sure, the honeymoon's over, but it ends for every president eventually, right? No, not this quickly. These were Bush's early average net approval ratings. Net is approval minus disapproval. This was Obama's early net approval ratings. These were Biden's early net approval ratings. This was Trump's first term, which actually set a new record low for average net approval. But then, here is Trump's second term, still better. But then this week, he's breaking his own record for being on the nose with an average net approval of almost -10. And if we break that approval down further by topic, there is that net approval we just talked about -10. We've been talking all year about how bad Trump's economic approval has been. It's currently -14. Here is why that is. Trump's at about -20 on trade and about -21 on inflation/cost of living issues, and they're all going down. That is what's killing him. Until recently, Trump was being held up by his popularity on immigration. Not anymore. This week, he finally fell underwater on immigration as well. So that is terrible news for Trump. In fact, according to YouGov, Trump's net approval on immigration has fallen to exactly where it was in his first term at this stage. Look at that drop-off there. And there isn't a lot of mystery about why that happened either. Do you remember that White House meeting between Trump and the El Salvador president? That occurred back on April 15. But since April 16, Trump's net approval on immigration has fallen 10 points, while this has been in the news constantly, this Abrego Garcia story in El Salvador. And yes, according to YouGov, 50% of Americans want Trump to bring the wrongfully deported Abrego Garcia back, whereas only 28% agreed with Trump's actions involving Abrego Garcia. The New York Times poll that backed up that thought as well, finding 31% of voters approved of Trump's handling of the Abrego Garcia case. That's not much, but wait for it. 11% said Trump should be able to send US citizens to prison in El Salvador, as he's been suggesting on this topic, and only 6% said he should be able to ignore Supreme Court rulings, which he's been getting dangerously close to doing as well on this topic. So I think Trump might well have misread the electorate on this issue. As for the economy, well, just have a look. This is Biden and Trump's first term. They're doing great, but Trump has really dropped the ball on the economy this time round in particular, and it is a huge anchor on his numbers, as you can see. What about demographics? Well, the less said about independents, the better.
The old record among independents for the worst ever was Donald Trump back in 2016, a net approval rating of minus 16 points. Well, Donald Trump has broken his own record here. He now holds, in this particular term, the worst ever net approval rating at this point in a presidency among independents at, get this, minus 22 points. He is 22 points underwater with independents.
And that was 2 weeks ago. It's even worse now. But wait, Harry, don't creep up on me, Jesus. But I want to focus particularly on young people. You might recall that in the last election, Trump only just lost amongst young people. It was actually a great result for him, but things have changed. While Trump's lost ground amongst every age group since the election, I want to focus on the green line, the 18 to 29s, where he has gone from 4 points down on the election to 27 points down. That's right, he's lost 23 points net approval amongst young voters. And if we go through the New York Times' latest poll, Trump is doing way worse amongst young voters in every single question. I've just picked a few examples for you here, just to illustrate what I'm talking about. How do you rate economic conditions today? Well, 22% of registered voters said great, but only 9% of 18 to 29s say that. 44% of registered voters say that Trump understands the problems facing them, but only 28% of 18 and 29 say that. 36% of registered voters say that Trump's changes have been a good thing for the country. How about the 18 and 29s? Only 18% of them say that. 54% of registered voters still support deporting illegal immigrants back to their home countries. It's a very popular position, but not amongst the 18 to 29s. Only 37% of them agree. 39% of registered voters support Trump's tariffs, compared to 20% of 18 to 29 supporting his tariffs. And finally, wait for this, 17% of 18 to 29s support the government spending cuts by Doge. Wow. Trump is in free fall amongst those 18 to 29s, in particular on the issue of immigration, which is supposed to be his strength, remember, and that is before, John, we start seeing the full effects of the tariffs in the next few weeks when the shortages are going to hit. Trump could well be heading towards the Biden zone.
It could be getting ugly, that is for sure. Well, for more on all of that, we're joined by Ashley Parker. She spent the last decade covering Trump's political career for the New York Times, the Washington Post, now with the Atlantic Monthly. A 3 times Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, she and 2 Atlantic Monthly colleagues went to the White House last week to interview President Trump. That followed a phone interview they had with him in late March, although at first, Trump didn't seem that keen.
Ashley Parker is not capable of doing a fair and unbiased interview. She's a radical left lunatic and has been as terrible as is possible for as long as I've known her. To this date, she doesn't even know that I won the presidency 3 times.
Radical left lunatic Ashley Parker, welcome to Planet America's Situation Room.
Thanks for having me.
So when you spoke to President Trump in late March on the phone, he said he was having fun as president second time around. What do you think he meant by fun? And when you saw him again last week at the White House with the polls falling and the tariff imbroglio, did you sense that he's still having fun?
So I think he meant fun comparatively. The reason we put that question to him was because as we reported out this cover story for The Atlantic, I cannot tell you the number of people in his inner circle, top advisors, allies, confidants who repeatedly said to us, he's just having more fun this time around. There are no bad days. So his answer was comparative to his first term. And I think the reason he is having quote unquote fun, he did say, I'm having fun based on, what I do is so serious. But he likes the fact that this time he understands the presidency in a way he didn't the first time. He understands how the levers of power work and how he can use and wield and manipulate them. He likes that he is surrounded by a group of loyalists in a way that he was not surrounded by a group of loyalists in the first term. And he feels more confident in his own skin, and he likes the fact, as someone put it to us, the first term people were always telling him, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't touch that, it's too hot. And this time he's realized, you know what, you can touch these things, and by things I mean democratic norms. They're not too hot, and this time around there's no one even telling him not to touch the stove. So he also sort of understands the norms and the niceties and the strictures that he can, if he so chooses, that he can kind of bulldoze his way through, or as he put it to us, do a big shattering of.
Ashley, we've just been looking at some pretty poor polls for Trump. Do you have any sense of how Trump really thinks his presidency is going behind all that bluster?
So he follows the polls incredibly closely, although his, people around him often show him what he wants to see, but he is, make no mistake, he's aware of the polls. But it was interesting when we went into the Oval Office last Thursday, we did kind of put this to him. We said, the first time we chatted, you were kind of at this pinnacle of your powers, everything was going well. We're now talking to you after Signalgate, this is after tariffs, are you now approaching the hard stuff? And his answer, he said, and again, it was comparative. He said, it still feels much softer this time around. And so again, I think he acknowledges he is in a harder place in his presidency than he was when he took office, 100 days in. But compared to his first term, he still feels much more ebullient and confident and empowered.
And actually, what do you think will be seen as the most consequential thing that Donald Trump has done in these first 100 days?
Broadly, it is just the boldness, the brashness, the aggressiveness, in certain instances, the creativity and the speed with which Trump and his team are moving to kind of shatter all sorts of norms, I think broadly. And I personally am very fascinated in this moment with the discussion we are having over due process. And, if it isn't a constitutional right, which it is, but the president has shown a willingness, at least in small specific instances so far, to ignore due process. And I am curious if this is the beginning of a slippery slope of curtailing a lot of those rights and processes, or if this is just one or two off.
Finally, how worried are you about the authoritarian tendencies of this administration? And as a member of the press who has covered Trump, have you personally felt some of that pressure in a new way?
So, to answer your question broadly, one thing that has also been interesting is in many ways how, and not in every aspect, but in how quickly a lot of these institutions and universities and law firms and, fellow foes and enemies have just been submitting to President Trump's will. You have these tech oligarchs, from Elon Musk to Jeff Bezos to Mark Zuckerberg, who in the first term, for instance, wanted to steer quite clear of him and in many cases were quite critical of him, now coming and going down to Mar-a-Lago before he was elected to kiss the ring and claiming prime real estate at his inauguration and seeming to try to, as much as the president wants to bend the country and the world to his will, these people seem to want to bend themselves to his will as well. And so it has been surprising, again, some of these law firms, some of these universities, some of these institutions that have capitulated in a way I would not have expected.
Ashley Parker, thanks for being with us on Planet America's Situation Room.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, for another perspective on Trump's first 100 days in his second term and a look at what might come next, we're joined by Ford O'Connell, a Republican strategist who's worked on campaigns including John McCain's 2008 White House run. He was a surrogate for the Trump White House and the 2020 Trump re-election campaign as well. Ford O'Connell, welcome back to Planet America's Situation Room. I wonder, what have you made of Trump's tactics in this first 100 days of flooding the zone? Because these polls suggest that voters are losing confidence in his handling of the economy, tariffs, all sorts of key measures aren't looking great for him.
Well, it's funny you say that because the top two issues in the 2024 presidential election were border security and inflation. And actually, inflation in America is down to 2.4%. It was as high as 9% under Biden. So that is a promise made, promise kept. And when it comes to the border, illegal migration is down 95%. Gotaways are down 99%. This is basically the safest border in modern American history. So on the two biggest campaign issues, he's doing very well. And actually, in the American polls, border security is up by something like plus 15. And when you look at the people who voted for him, only 2% after the 100-day mark say they regret their vote or would change their vote from the 2024 presidential election. So I think what's happening here is a lot of the U.S. media coverage happens to be negative on Donald Trump. And when you're not asking voters themselves versus the media, you sort of get this idea that somehow he's failing.
Ford, if you think Trump's achievements aren't being recognised, do you think he's not doing so well at communications? Because most people would say that communications is Trump's strength.
Well, I think that two things are going on here. The Media Research Center showed that in the first 100 days, the coverage of Donald Trump in U.S. media, ABC, NBC, CBS, was 92% negative. To put that in perspective, it was 89% negative in his first term to the first 100 days. And when you look at Joe Biden, it was 59% positive. I think the American media hasn't learned a darn thing, and they're continuing to cover Trump like they used to. And that's why trust in the media is so far down.
Ford O'Connell, would you concede that President Trump may have overpromised? And that's part of the problems. He did literally say he would end the war between Russia and Ukraine on day one, if not before he even returned to the White House. He hasn't delivered on that. Would you concede that is his biggest failing in the first 100 days?
No, and I do agree that he did overpromise when he said he's going to end it on day one. But when you look at the American public, they still agree with his foreign policy over Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's. They understand that he wants to end the war in Ukraine. And not only that, the war between Israel and Gaza as well. And I think part of the reason why they flooded the zone, as you put it, move fast, is because the midterm elections are going to come up in 2026, and the Republicans don't know if they're going to have the House of Representatives. So therefore, you have to move quick. That's just the nature of American politics.
And Ford, what do you wish Trump had done differently, if anything?
It's hard to say that, and here's why. Because everyone's saying, well, look at what he's doing on trade. This has never been done before. You'll have the Wall Street Journal say he should do it this way. Well, nobody seems to know because no one has ever tried to renegotiate trade deals with more than 70 countries at the same time while putting the squeeze on the Chinese Communist Party. I'm going to give you a great example of this, Chaz. The American media bitched, when Donald Trump threw tariffs on the Chinese Communist Party in his first term. But here's what's so amazing about it. Everyone threw their arms up in the air. Well, when the Biden administration came in, they realized what a great idea it was, 20% tariffs. They kept them on and actually added more teeth to them. That's something that no one actually is discussing, not only in the domestic media, but also in the international media.
Ford O'Connell, thanks for joining us in Planet America's Situation Room.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The Trump administration has stepped up its fight with judges standing in the way of their immigration policies.
FBI agents arrested a county circuit judge this morning. The Justice Department accusing Judge Hannah Dugan of helping an undocumented immigrant avoid arrest after he appeared in her courtroom last week.
That undocumented immigrant, Mexican man Eduardo Flores Ruiz, appeared in Judge Hannah Dugan's courtroom for a pre-trial conference on April the 18th. He was facing 3 counts of misdemeanor battery for alleged domestic violence offences. When Judge Dugan was told that immigration agents were outside her courtroom to arrest Flores Ruiz for being in the country without a valid visa, she called the situation absurd and left the bench. After telling the immigration agents to get a judicial warrant, Judge Dugan then allegedly ushered Flores Ruiz out of the courtroom via another exit. He was soon arrested on the street outside anyway, but a week later, the FBI was back to arrest Judge Dugan. FBI Director Kash Patel posted a picture of the judge being taken away in handcuffs on charges of obstruction, adding,
"No one is above the law."
And US Attorney General Pam Bondi echoed those sentiments.
We could not believe, actually, that a judge really did that. They're deranged is all I can think of. I cannot believe. I think some of these judges think they are beyond and above the law, and they are not.
Judge Dugan was released on her own recognizance, with the next hearing scheduled for May 15th. Protesters, though, gathered outside the courthouse to express their concern.
Drop all charges against Judge Hannah Dugan immediately.
There's been a huge outcry about this arrest from Democrats, for example, like Senator Tina Smith, who tweeted out, if Kash Patel and Donald Trump don't like a judge, they think they can arrest them. We must stand up to this blatant power grab. But is that what's going on? It's not like they arrested her after an inconvenient ruling or after she said something that they didn't like. Surely if a judge has broken the law, they should be arrested. I mean, many Democrats have said when talking about Trump's actions that no one is above the law. Or at least they shouldn't be. Supreme Court. The question is, did this judge break the law? Well, this is what ex-FBI Acting Chief Andrew McCabe had to say about the case. And reminder, Andrew McCabe is no friend of Trump's. He said, it's not a slam dunk, but it's also not an unreasonable complaint. There's plenty of evidence in the complaint to get you beyond the probable cause phase, which is where we are right now. So the case isn't obviously unreasonable, despite Democrats saying things like this.
This is without any historical precedent and truly terrifying.
But it's not true at all to say this is unprecedented. There was a very obvious precedent in Trump's last term in 2018 when a district court judge, Shelley Joseph, and a court officer were arrested for helping the undocumented migrant sneak out of her courtroom before an ICE officer could detain him. Now, admittedly, Biden's DOJ did drop those charges against her in 2022, and there were some other differences between the cases as well. Firstly, Trump's DOJ let the first judge hand herself in to the authorities rather than perp walking her like they did this judge. And by the way, Kash Patel pointing out that photo of the judge in cuffs was a blatant violation of DOJ guidelines, which clearly state that DOJ personnel should not voluntarily disclose a photo of a defendant unless it serves a law enforcement function or unless the photo is already part of the public record. But anyway, let's look at the other differences between the two cases because I think they are enlightening. In the first case, the Trump administration investigated the judge for a year until 2019. To make sure they had the goods on her. Whereas this time round, they only took a week before charging the judge, so they might not have had a chance to gather a lot of evidence. On that note, in the other case, Judge Joseph supposedly helped the migrant leave the courthouse through a secret, non-public exit, and she saw to it that the migrant actually escaped arrest. What that does is show an intent to obstruct, which is a critical element of sticking this charge. By contrast, though, in this case, the judge isn't accused of hiding the guy or helping him actually escape the officers. She sent him through a private exit to the very same public hallway where the agents were waiting for him. Both Agent A and Agent B had a clear view of the migrant, and they ended up following him and arresting him. So that's quite different from the original case. Basically, all the DOJ have to establish the judge's corrupt intent is that the courtroom deputy heard the judge say something like, wait, come with me. And then she led him through the jury door, once again to the same hallway where agents were waiting for him. So is that enough evidence of intent? I don't know. John, I'm not sure there is a problem arresting a judge for obstruction if you can make your case. But were the administration so keen to make an example out of this judge that they might not have built a very strong case? And could that backfire on them down the track? Well, we'll see.
We shall. It sounds entirely plausible, however. Now, America recently recorded the steepest decline in Australian tourists since the COVID pandemic. So maybe it's time for America to launch a new advertising campaign to try and get Australians to come back. Perhaps it could be something like this.
G'day, Aussies. We've noticed there's less of you visiting these days. What gives? After all, we've freed up some space recently and sealed in the goodness. In America, you can have some you time.
The tourist says that she spent more than a week in solitary confinement.
Disappear for days.
Detained by ICE for 12 days while attempting to renew her work visa.
Because you never know what tomorrow will bring.
ICE has not said when they plan to release Becky Burke.
Because there's no mistakes.
The Maryland father, the Trump administration admits, was deported by mistake.
Just opportunities to reinvent yourself.
Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. There is no Maryland father.
So come on over, Australia. We've got no beef with you.
They ban American beef. They won't take any of our beef.
Except the beef. America. Why the bloody hell would you?
Before we go this week, former Republican Congressman George Santos says he is humbled and chastened, and he's appealing to President Trump to give him, quote, a chance to prove he's more than the mistakes he's made. Santos's plea to the president comes after being sentenced to 7 years in prison after admitting to wire fraud and aggravated identity theft.
In addition to his prison sentence, Santos has agreed to pay $580,000 in penalties.
And old George's crimes were many, including spending campaign contributions on designer clothing, withdrawing cash, paying off personal debts and transferring money to associates. He also brazenly ripped his supporters off, stealing the personal identity and financial information of contributors to his campaign. Santos was also convicted of falsely claiming unemployment benefits while running for Congress to the tune of more than $24,000. And then there were the lies he told, shamelessly padding his CV.
Investigation by the New York Times claims the resume of Republican Congressman-elect George Santos is largely fabricated.
Claims that suggest much of his resume, including where he went to college, where he worked, are entirely made up.
Did I embellish my resume? Yes, I did. And I'm sorry.
Glad you're sorry, George, but the falsehoods didn't end there. Santos made outlandish claims connecting himself to the Holocaust, 9/11 and more.
I've seen how socialism destroys people's lives because my grandparents survived the Holocaust.
I'm a Jew, trust me.
He later attempted to clarify to Fox News his connection to Judaism.
My heritage is Jewish. I've always identified as Jewish. I was raised a practicing Catholic. I've always joked with friends and circles, even in the campaign, I'd say, guys, I'm Jew-ish.
Lies, lies, lies. George Santos has been ordered to report to prison at the end of July. Since leaving Congress, he has been hosting a podcast. Who doesn't? And he was recently asked about the possibility of a presidential pardon.
If you do have to spend years in prison, do you think, do you hope, do you expect, would you ask Trump to pardon you?
You bet your sweet ass I would. Of course I'm going to ask.
Have those conversations begun?
I have not talked about this publicly for obvious reasons, but let's just put that we're exploring anything we can to, ameliorate the blow.
It's his get out of jail card. The White House hasn't commented on the Santos sentence or the possibility of a presidential pardon. We will see on that as well, Chaz. But that's it for our trip to Planet America. The weekend edition is back this Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern on ABC News.
And we'll be back here in the Situation Room on ABC TV next Wednesday at 9 p.m. and on iView, YouTube and Facebook from 8 p.m. See you then.
Bye-bye.